Good evening. I'm Kelda Yoon. A child under 5 years old from Hamilton has died of measles. It's the first measles death in decades in this province. As Tali Ricci reports, health officials are reminding people of the importance of getting vaccinated as cases continue to rise globally.
Public Health Ontario said the child who died was not vaccinated against measles. Officials haven't confirmed when the child died or their exact age.
Even though there's an awful and tragic case in Ontario, it's also important to remember that there are about 130,000 deaths related to measles all over the world per year, and that the vast majority of these deaths are in children and, of course, are preventable.
A report from the health agency shows there were no other measles-related deaths recorded in the province since 1989, when tracking first began. Measles has been on the rise across Canada as cases increase globally, particularly in Europe.
We will see Canadians who might travel abroad who are unvaccinated or undervaccinated possibly pick up this infection and bring it home, or other travelers come to Canada with this infection. We have seen imported cases. Unfortunately, that's going to be an ongoing issue.
There have been 22 cases in the province so far this year. 6 of those cases were in Toronto. 15 of the cases were linked to travel. 13 of the cases were children, and in 12 of those instances, the children were not vaccinated, while the vaccination status of one was unknown. The report says 5 infections, all in unvaccinated children under 5 years old, required hospitalization.
Initially, it can be like any kind of viral infection where you have a runny nose, coughing. We might have these spots inside of your gum, inside your cheek, and then you get, usually a few days later, you get the typical symptoms of a rash that usually starts in the head and goes down, and you can get red eyes, again, fever, and then from there can be all kinds of complications.
Doctors are also saying that interruptions to childhood vaccination schedules during the pandemic means that some children may have missed a dose.
Now, there's been a lot of outreach from public health units to really ensure people are up to date, especially if they might have missed a vaccine or two during some of those darker days.
As well, so in some places, the infrastructure for public health and vaccination has decreased. But also with COVID, there was an increase in the amount of people having vaccine hesitancy.
According to the Canadian Immunization Guide, the first dose should be given when a child is 12 to 15 months of age, and the second at 18 months, or any time after that, but no later than around school entry. Doctors say if you're planning to travel with an infant, the first shot can be moved up to 6 months in some cases. Tali Ricci, CBC News, Toronto.
Some sad news to report from Toronto City Hall today. Don Valley West City Councillor Jay Robinson has died. We have Municipal Affairs reporter Sean Jeffords here to tell us more about the veteran councillor. And Sean, what do we know about Councillor Robinson's passing?
Well, Kelda, the councillor staff sent out a notice around noon today just to notify people of her death. We understand that she passed last night, surrounded by her family. She was 61 years old. Tributes began to pour in very quickly. She was very public about her diagnosis and battle with breast cancer in 2019, but her cause of death has not been announced. Let's hear some of those tributes that started to come in earlier today.
As council members and as a mayor, we miss her work. We miss her passion in serving her communities and her dedication to supporting the arts and culture of this city. She's done phenomenal work, and she is just really loved by the residents she represents.
I think we can all say that Jay had all the qualities that we like in people. She was honest, she was direct, she was very hardworking, and she cared very, very deeply about the community of Don Valley. She will leave a mark on women in politics for a very, very long time, and I was very privileged to work alongside her and to learn from her.
Jay never gave up on representing her community, representing the issues she cared about. Up until the very last days and weeks of her life, she was fighting for a city that is more beautiful, more inclusive, greener, and fairer, and we'll all miss her.
So Kelda, you could hear there the councillors and mayor really talking very passionately about the contribution that Councillor Robinson made to City Council and to the city. And flags will be flying at half-mast at City Hall, and there will be books of condolence at North York Civic Centre and at City Hall over the weekend for members of the public to sign.
Robinson spent 14 years as councillor of Don Valley West, and we heard about some of her accomplishments there from other councillors. Can you tell us more about her career and more about her accomplishments at City Hall?
So Councillor Robinson was first elected in 2010, and I think it's fair to say she was a pretty popular councillor, especially in her ward, where she was re-elected 3 times. And in 2022, she actually garnered 75% or nearly 75% of the vote. So that's quite an accomplishment right there. Now, she also served in some very key committees and in some key roles down here at City Hall. She was the chair of the Toronto Transit Commission board for a time and also the chair of the Public Works and Infrastructure Committee. And while she was on that committee, she helped champion and shepherd in the Vision Zero road safety policy. So this is the policy that aims to eliminate all road and pedestrian deaths in the city. Now, it's a very ambitious program, and Robinson was a key person behind that. She also spent a decade and more as an employee of the city, a civil servant, and she helped usher in Summerlicious, Winterlicious, and Nuit Blanche.
Wow. And Sean, do we know yet how the city will fill the vacancy on council?
Kelda, we don't yet know that. Mayor Olivia Chow says that it hasn't been decided. Council does have some options, though. Under the city bylaws, council could choose to hold a by-election, or they could choose to appoint someone in that role until the end of the council term. Normally, at this point in a council term where you still have about half of that term to go, council would opt for a by-election. I don't expect we'll have a decision from them this week when they meet, but what I do think we will see are a lot of tributes on the council floor to Councillor Robinson, and just a celebration of her contribution to the city.
A sad day at City Hall. Thanks so much, Sean. Our Sean Jeffords reporting. A tough loss for Toronto's women's hockey team tonight. The team losing to Minnesota in a deciding Game 5 of their semifinal series, failing to advance to the PWHL finals. Our Vanessa Belentek joins us live outside Coca-Cola Coliseum. And Vanessa, a disappointed home crowd tonight. You know, many fans had expected Toronto to advance to the finals after they won the first 2 games, but Minnesota staging quite the comeback.
Yeah. Kelda, Toronto was top seed heading into the playoffs. They even had their choice of opponent, choosing Minnesota, and they did really well the first 2 games. But as you know, Minnesota brought it all the way to Game 5, where today Toronto lost 4-1. Fans are obviously really disappointed, but they say that they're really proud of how their team played. Here's what they told me.
Sophia Cunnin got.
It was a nail-biter of a game between Toronto and Minnesota tonight, and unfortunately, Toronto wasn't able to pull through. A disappointing result for the sold-out crowd.
Well, I thought the game was good. Yeah, it was a really good game. Like, they played really well. I can't say otherwise, but I'm just sad that we don't get to go to the finals.
Very disappointed. Because they were expected to won the first 2 games, and without Spooner, they're just not the same team.
The team was without their leading scorer, Natalie Spooner, who was knocked out in Game 3 with a knee injury. Despite the loss, many fans say they remain proud.
Oh my goodness, the game was incredible. The energy in the game, the talent in the game. You know, we ultimately had more shots on net than Minnesota, so it sucks when they don't land, but it's still what you want to see.
The first period came and went with no goals, though Toronto had some really good chances. Onto the second, Minnesota would score first with a power play goal, but not even a minute later, Toronto responding with a goal from Rebecca Leslie, tying it at 1 apiece. But it would be the only goal Toronto would get all game. Minnesota would score again on a power play in the third, making it 2-1. Toronto pulling their goalie near the end of the third, but they just couldn't get one in the net. Minnesota would score 2 more in the empty net. Despite not advancing to the finals as expected, fans say they are proud to see Toronto play so well in its first professional season and are hopeful to see what comes next.
It's great to be here with my daughter supporting women in hockey, and seeing all the men here supporting women's hockey is amazing. So it's our second game, and loving every minute of it.
Yeah, I mean, like, this is my first game. Like, it was so insane. Like, just seeing all the towels going and everybody was so excited. Like, just thinking that this is how it's escalated to is crazy.
Kelda, people started leaving here by the time Minnesota scored their third goal. But they left with smiles on their faces, laughing, talking about what a good time they had. As you heard, they're really excited about the team and the league's future. And in many cases, like Toronto has seen before, they're saying that there's always next year. Kelda.
That's what we always say, right? And we're still very proud of the ladies, of course. Thanks so much, Vanessa. That's our Vanessa Valentek live for us tonight. The search is over for the Toronto Maple Leafs. Craig Berube has been hired as the team's new head coach, replacing Sheldon Keefe. The team breaking the news on social media early this evening. Berube becomes the franchise's 32nd bench boss. He joins the Buds after coaching the St. Louis Blues for 6 seasons, leading them to a Stanley Cup win in 2019. Welcome back. 3 teenage girls are expected to plead guilty in the swarming death of Kenneth Lee back in December 2022. The girls appeared in provincial court in Toronto today. The court also heard that 3 other girls are expected to plead not guilty. 8 girls in total between the ages of 13 and 16 were charged with second-degree murder in connection with Lee's death. The 59-year-old died after the group allegedly beat and stabbed him. Premier Doug Ford has written to the Prime Minister. Now, he's asking the federal government to stop any new approvals of safe drug supply sites. Queen's Park reporter Lorena Redekop has more.
The Premier's request is about safe supply sites. They offer prescribed medications approved by Health Canada for those addicted to drugs. In his letter to the Prime Minister, Doug Ford calls on the federal government to immediately stop approving new sites and conduct a formal review of existing ones in the province. According to Health Canada's website, 16 locations have been approved in Ontario, with a goal of preventing overdoses and saving lives. Prime Minister Justin Trudeau was asked about this.
The toxic drug crisis and the opioid epidemic is something that we need to respond to with the best science possible.
He didn't give a direct answer on Ford's request, but also said this.
Making sure that we're taking this with a public health approach and a community safety approach, as opposed to necessarily criminalizing or further marginalizing people.
Now Toronto's mayor says she's writing a letter of her own.
I'm releasing a letter that invites Premier Ford and Prime Minister Trudeau to join with the City of Toronto to pilot actual 24/7 treatment program.
An academic who helped set up one of the sites in Toronto worries Ford is signaling another government taking a tough-on-crime approach.
Alberta tried to shut down these programs. They did, and we saw overdose rates increasing dramatically following that.
And he says, from his perspective, the programs work.
And I saw the extent to which it transformed people's lives, the extent to which people were no longer overdosing unnecessarily on a highly volatile street supply.
Ford's move follows the NDP government in BC stepping back from part of its decriminalization pilot project, no longer allowing it in public spaces. In the letter, Premier Ford also expresses support for the federal government, saying it won't allow decriminalization without a province's backing, effectively putting an end to a Toronto request. One Conservative strategist agrees with Ford, making his position clear on this issue.
Politicians of every stripe now across the country are starting to backtrack on those policies that have just not panned out.
The Association of Ontario Police Chiefs has supported decriminalization since 2020. Now it says it's reviewing that, in part due to the Ontario government's position. Lorena Redekop, CBC News, Toronto.
Now to a cautionary tale for anyone who lives in a semi-detached home. A fight over major renovations has pitted 2 Toronto neighbours against each other in what's become a bitter legal battle. Ryan Patrick Jones shows us how it all started.
This house on Waverley Road in the Beaches has become the site of a bitter feud between neighbours. Kathy and Pat Button own the home that's been torn down. The retired couple plan to move there from Waterloo once it's been rebuilt. They got approval from the city to build second-story and rear additions, a new front porch, and a deck with a basement walkout. Their next-door neighbours, with whom they share a common wall, initially provided letters of support. but have now taken their neighbors to court, claiming the project went beyond what they thought they'd agreed to.
What we were sold on and what happened are very different things. One day, Tata and the kids show up and there's the absence of half a house. So what was supposed to be a renovation became a demolition and an excavation well into the back and almost a meter onto our property.
Because the whole structure is just shaking.
The Schifrins say cracks formed in their home, their backyard was dug up without permission, and squirrels and raccoons moved into the space between their ceiling and upstairs floor.
Children were afraid to sleep in their own bedroom.
When you get into a semi, this is the worst case nightmare that you can imagine.
The Buttons didn't want to go on camera. However, they told me by phone that they always had permission to partially demolish their home and to excavate the backyard, including digging 2.5 feet into their neighbor's property to build a shared common wall. They say they informed the Schifrins and other neighbors of their plans, shared designs, and that the scope of the project has barely changed. They also say they worked closely with the city and professional firms throughout the design and construction process. The city confirmed to CBC that the Buttons' initial permit allowed partial demolition and excavation to achieve their designs. But the work hasn't been without missteps. The project was hit with a permit violation in October. That's when workers took down what was left of 2 walls after water and termite damage was discovered during construction. A letter from a structural engineer the couple provided to the city states the walls were not suitable for providing structural support for the floor above and recommended the walls be replaced. The Buttons say they took the walls down immediately because they didn't want them to fall down. They say they informed a city inspector and applied for a revised permit. In the meantime, an order to comply was issued, halting work until they got a new permit. That came in March, and construction has since resumed. But now the dispute is heading to court. The Schifrins filed a lawsuit seeking $200,000 in damages. The Buttons are preparing their response and plan to refute the Schifrins' claims. This property lawyer, who isn't involved in the case, says you can expect to see more of these kinds of disagreements in Toronto's real estate market, where red-hot prices have people renovating rather than relocating. She says she tries to resolve neighborly disputes through mediation rather than going to court.
And then there's clearly a winner or loser, and then you have to live beside these people until one of you move. And it makes it a little bit more difficult to live beside your neighbor if you've lost or won a court case against them.
In this case, there are no winners, and the neighbors might not be living beside each other for very long. The Schifrins say they plan to sell. Ryan Patrick Jones, CBC News, Toronto.
It's a huge week for Canadian swimming. Since Monday, swimmers from across the country have been making a splash at the Olympic and Paralympic swim trials in Scarborough, hoping to win a spot on the team heading to Paris. Lane Harrison was poolside at the Pan Am Sports Centre today and brings us all of the action.
More than 800 swimmers were in Scarborough this week hoping to punch a ticket to Olympic glory, with athletes ranging from unknown hopefuls to household names like Olympian Summer McIntosh. She's made one of the biggest splashes of the trials so far.
Summer McIntosh did it last year at the trials. She's gonna do it again!
On Thursday night, she beat her own world record in the 400-meter medley.
It was awesome. The crowd was absolutely electric. I heard all you guys during the 100 breaststroke, and it really kept me going, so thank you.
Among those in that crowd was Leanna Morgans, a young swimmer who had already seen McIntosh break one world record last year.
It was just so fun to watch how fast she could go at such a young age.
There were races happening all morning, with a big one to come tonight, the women's 100-meter freestyle finals, which U of T swimmer Ainsley McMurray will be competing in. Earlier in the day, she set a personal best in her qualifying swim for the race.
I'm fighting for a relay spot, so making the A final is the big goal. There's the girls that everyone's watching, but once you get in the water, once you have a lane, it's really on anybody, so I'm not counting myself out just yet.
Swimming Canada's Nathan White says the 100-meter race will be the one to watch tonight.
We've got Penny Alexiak trying to work back from injuries and surgeries. Everyone knows she's the most decorated Olympian with 7 medals in her career, but it's been a tough couple of years.
With so much talent in the pool, McMurray says it's an exciting time to be a Canadian swimmer.
The team that we're building, both on the men's and the women's side, is so strong to contend for finals, for medals.
The Olympic and Paralympic trials will run until Sunday evening. An official list of the Canadians representing the country in Paris this summer will be announced that night. Lane Harrison, CBC News, Toronto.
Elaine mentioned the women's 100-meter freestyle. Penny Alexiak was the winner of that race with a time of 53.66 seconds. Go Penny. A live look at our city tonight, and the unofficial start to summer is now upon us. Victoria Day long weekend. Let's go to Victor Palo now with more on how it's shaping up. Victor?
Starting off your long weekend, it's going to be some scattered showers across the Gordon Horseshoe, the Golden Horseshoe. And of course, as we're expecting that rain to clear, the clouds will also be clearing, bringing us a lot of sunshine and clear nights, especially close to that Saturday, Sunday, as we tail off our long weekend on Monday as well. Now, here's what's happening when it comes to that rain is we're going to be expecting it overnight into the start of your Saturday. But as we get closer towards Saturday lunchtime into the afternoon, you do see that rain eventually stops and the clouds finally clear. That's going to give us a very clear overnight into your Sunday morning. And as well, Sunday is going to be a day we're expecting temperatures in the mid-20s and feeling quite almost like summer. We talked about our average high this time of year, close to 19 degrees, and we're expecting the temperatures to be at highs closer to almost 25 when it comes to your long weekend. That's beautiful weather for here in the GTA. Now, how much rainfall amounts will we be receiving between now and, let's say, the start of Saturday? Because we know by Sunday we should be all said and done. As you look here, about 5 millimeters of rain we're expecting to fall. Not that much in its total, but also enough to make sure that if you do have plans to be outdoors on your Saturday morning, you want to make sure you do have an umbrella because you don't want to get caught in the middle of all that rain. Now, it looks like as if when it comes to the rest of the highs, we're going to be anticipating a lot more warmer temperatures than we have earlier this week. Now, you can see that Saturday is going to be a high of 22 degrees. But when it comes to Sunday and Monday, temperatures will be closer to almost 30 degrees. And those are summer-like temperatures. Average highs of 19 degrees, your average low of 7. Taking a look at our 5-day forecast, it looks like we're well above those averages. Now, if you do have plans to be outdoors, make sure that you do carry lots of water and a hat, because when temperatures are this high, it's very easy to get heat stroke. Now, another thing you also want to do is you want to make sure you don't leave your pets locked inside any vehicles or locked inside anywhere where it's warm without any ventilation of warm air, because when it does get warm and hot, it is not good for pets or older people or even kids to be left unattended. Now, hope you have yourselves a beautiful long weekend and make sure to enjoy that sun. Over to you, Kelda.
All right, thanks so much, Victor. And that is our show for you tonight. Thank you so much for watching. Have a wonderful long weekend, everyone.